3I Atlas is getting more fascinating by the day. And we have new evidence of non-gravitational acceleration of 3I Atlas at perihelion. Very, very interesting, right? So we're going to look at the latest information. We're going to look at both sides of the coin here. You know, one side saying it's just a comet, and then the other side saying it's potentially alien technology. We're going to look at all the information, and we're going to take it where it leads us. So thank you very much for being here. I hope you're having a fantastic day today. I'm Rex Bear. How the heck are you? All right, so buckle up, Buttercups. Let's go. New information suggests that 3I Atlas experienced an acceleration not explained by gravity. And we're going to look at the paper in just a minute from Professor Loeb. And I've got several other papers. We've got a plasma physicist describing his thoughts and information on why he believes 3I Atlas is alien technology. Greg Allison is going to share his information on why he thinks it could potentially be something besides a comet. And then we're going to look at Professor Loeb's information as well. And we're going to look at their backgrounds and their bios. And I think by the end of this presentation, you're going to have a really good idea. At least you're going to be up to date with all the data that we have on 3I Atlas. So thank you very much for being here with me. And make sure to get your Boomer Boost from boomerboost.com. Just use the code REX20. You'll get 20% off. This stuff is amazing. I take it pretty much every single day unless I'm out of stock, and then I order more. But I'll do a scoop of the Boomer Boost and the Gladiator Barley. So this is a quick shameless plug, folks. If you don't want to listen to it, just come back in 30 seconds. It'll be real quick. Gladiator Barley, Boomer Boost, mix it in your water. You're going to love it. At least I do anyway. And everybody that I've ever given any to or talked to, they think this stuff's amazing. Boomerboost.com. Use the code REX20. Get an extra 20% off. The amount of nutrition, this is like the cutting edge in nutrition. Okay, that was my shameless plug. Thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube. Hit the bell for all notifications if you would, please. And jump on over to our Rumble page. It'll take you 90 seconds to subscribe. It's totally free. And if you're looking for exclusive content, unedited, uncensored, you can find us on Patreon and leakproject.com. We upload a lot of field trips and long format interviews. I just did an amazing interview yesterday with Jen Pinkstone, where she does these human design charts and she decodes. Anyway, it was a pretty spooky podcast. It was a Halloween special. So jump on over to Rumble and Patreon and listen to those. And let's get into this. All right, let's pull up the paper, shall we? Oh, yeah. So what are you up to today? Anything exciting? I'm going to go check out Durango later today, I think. All right, so this is the paper. Very, very good paper by Professor Loeb. First evidence for a non-gravitational acceleration of 3I Atlas at perihelion. So what does that mean? It means there's signs that this thing's moving, not assisted by gravity, because it actually sped up a little bit. We're going to get into the details on that. By the date of its perihelion, which was yesterday, 3I Atlas displayed the first evidence of a non-gravitational acceleration. That's really cool. The report was filed by David Farnokia, which you can see it right here from jpl.nasa. This is the gentleman right here. And the data that he has, he put in the small body database lookup. So this is the math. This is the data that suggests 3I Atlas actually sped up without the assist of gravitation. It's really cool. The non-gravitational acceleration was measured at the perihelion distance of 1.36 times the Earth-Sun separation, equivalent to about 203 million kilometers. It had two components in the orbital plane of 3I Atlas. It had a radial acceleration away from the sun and a transverse acceleration relative to the sun's direction. And I'm going to explain that in more detail in a minute. If 3I Atlas is propelled by the rocket effect of ejected gas, then momentum conservation implies that this object would lose half of its mass over a characteristic timescale equal to the ejection speed divided by the measured non-gravitational acceleration. So it's saying it should be getting smaller, and it's not. At least we don't have any data that it is. For a thermal ejection speed of a few hundred meters per second, the evaporation half-life of 3I Atlas is 6 months. This implies that over the month it takes 3I Atlas to cross a spatial scale of order its perihelion separation from the sun. 3I Atlas would lose about 1/10 of its mass. Such a massive mass loss should be detectable in the form of a large plume of gas surrounding 3I Atlas during the upcoming months of November and December. First evidence for a non-gravitational acceleration of 3I Atlas at perihelion. Let me share a little bit more details. So the radial outward component, a transverse component, the rate of brightness of the object before perihelion was also unusually bright, far brighter than other comets recorded in the past. If the non-gravitational acceleration is caused by sublimation, which is gas ejecting from the object, then given assumed ejection speeds, which is hundreds of miles a second, 3I Atlas could lose 10% of its mass in a month around perihelion. The unusual bluer than the sun color seen near perihelion is also noted. Natural comets tend to redden as dust scatters sunlight. This blue shift is an anomaly. There could be a natural explanation, such as strong CO ionized gas emissions, or something more exotic, such as an engine. And the deviation, while measurable, corresponds only to a relatively small spatial shift and does not change the risk profile, making it a threat to Earth, they say. The author emphasizes, Professor Loeb, that anomalies in data should not be ignored just because they're lacking. They must be investigated. If the object is losing mass at the rate implied, future observations next month and in December could detect dramatic changes such as large gas plumes, evolving coma, tail structure, and the article also predicts ground space telescopes will have a better chance of observing the object on Earth here over the next couple of months. The non-gravitational acceleration, which is what's so exciting about this, and the color shift further add odd features to 3I Atlas's behavior. Understanding them could also inform how interstellar objects behave, how they differ from typical solar system comets. So let's take a look at like what radial outward acceleration actually means. You probably already know what it means, but I'm just going to explain to you in case you didn't know. So radial outward acceleration, what does that mean? Radial means along the line between the object and the sun. Outward means it's pushing away from the sun. So when Professor Loeb says a radial outward component of 135 kilometers a day, what that means is 3I Atlas sped up in the direction away from the sun faster than gravity alone would predict, as if something was giving it a push, an extra push, like not gravity. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? So 135 kilometers a day, the object's speed away from the sun increased by about 135 kilometers each day, every day. That's about 1,000 times weaker than Earth's gravity, but still measurable by precise orbit tracking. Why does it matter? Well, normally the only major force on a comet is solar gravity, pulling inward. If you detect acceleration away from the sun, it means another force is acting. Usually gas or dust jets erupting as the sun heats the surface, sublimation. In this case, the measured acceleration was stronger and more complex than typical comets, so Professor Loeb called it non-gravitational analogy. Imagine you're near a campfire, holding an icy snowball. As it warms, steam jets shoot off. Each jet acts like a tiny thruster, nudging the snowball in the opposite direction. That's the same idea. If 3I Atlas is the snowball, the sun is the campfire, and the outgassing jets produced that outward extra push. So let's talk about that for a minute, because a lot of people, it's so interesting when I talk to people that are much smarter than I am, and they know a lot more about the solar system and the planets and the stars and the constellations, like the mechanics. And some people are set in their way that this is no question in their mind a comet, an interstellar comet, a flying space ball, and they're convinced. And then I know people that are just as smart, equally as smart on the other side of the spectrum, saying that they believe it's an extraterrestrial craft. But they're also looking at all the data. They're not saying absolute. So typically when somebody says absolute, oh, it's absolutely a comet. That's all that it is. That's why NASA is not releasing more information. Like, let's talk about that. I think that's very, very important. We need to get NASA to release the undoctored high-rise imaging from October 2nd, from early this month, because that is the best equipment to film and image this comet. Also, very interesting to note, Greg Allison. So let's talk about Greg for a minute. I want to get into this. So I'm going to jump around here a little bit, so please stay with me. We looked at David's data. This is the data that Professor Loeb is using, showing that this thing is moving with non-gravitational force. Professor Loeb also says NASA is hiding critical evidence about 3i Atlas. You can read about this in the New York Post. You can read about it in News Nation. And he doesn't say that they're hiding the information because it's an alien spacecraft. He calls it, I think he called it human stupidity instead of extraterrestrial intelligence because of the government shutdown right now. However, as Greg Allison brought up, the high rise is connected with Arizona University. So is everybody working on the high rise a part of NASA, or are there students that are working with high rise, or do they just shut it all down? And the question is why? And it's not just the US. There's other nations out there that have or should have images of this object. And one of those nations is China. China has similar technology on Mars. And if you go back, I did a deep search looking for any images that China has of 3i Atlas. And there's YouTube videos that came out that said China took images of 3i Atlas, but they're not showing any. Why? Why are they not showing us the latest images? So Professor Loeb warned on Newsmax on Saturday that the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer-led government shutdown is now obstructing NASA's release of key imagery from a mysterious interstellar object, 3i Atlas, calling the delay terrestrial stupidity rather than evidence of extraterrestrial secrecy. I love that. That's great. But anyway, let's look at this for a moment. After I close all of these ads that are popping up. 3i Atlas' strange behavior challenges what astronomers know about comets. It lit up far faster than predicted, as well as all the other anomalies. But let's talk about Greg for a minute. So Greg Allison just did a video on his YouTube page, and you should go watch this. It's titled 3i Atlas Just Lit Up. And not only is he really detailed and very easy to understand when he describes these technologies and these satellites and how they work and how 3i Atlas works and the anomalies of 3i Atlas, but the guy's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. So let me just give you a little rundown on Greg. And the reason I'm mentioning Greg is because Greg has been on the show, and he's going to be on the show again, and he's doing his own podcast about 3i Atlas, and he's bringing up these anomalies. And he's not saying it's an alien spacecraft. He's saying, look, it's probably just a really cool comet that we don't understand yet. But these anomalies don't make sense when you look at the traditional data sets on comets. So why? And the math, the calculations that he did on the orbiting of 3i Atlas was very similar to Professor Loeb. And they didn't look at each other's data before they, as far as the math goes, when they were coming up with these calculations about the orbit and the maneuvering of 3i Atlas in such a way that it gets so close to several planets, and then it's out of view from terrestrial telescopes based upon the trajectory and the orbit maneuvering. And it came from the dark forest in the galaxy close to the WOW signal. There's just so many bizarre anomalies with this object. But Greg had mentioned in his podcast that there's also Chinese technology that can pick up on 3i Atlas. So why hasn't China released any images? And this is one of their pieces of technology called the Tianwen-1, an interplanetary mission where they send a robotic spacecraft to Mars. Now, the cameras that they've got on this out there on Mars is similar to what we have, the high rise. And they should have been able to capture imaging and videos and as much data as the high rise or close to it, and then release that to the public. So why hasn't China released this information to the public? Why hasn't the high rise released this information to the public? Is it just political charades? Or is there something more to it? And maybe it's not even, here's another thing that I was thinking about. If it is a near-Earth object or some type of threat to Earth, then what a great way to divert attention by creating this theory of alien technology. So that would definitely change the perspective of people's opinions about this object, they'd be more fascinated to see it than frightened, because if they knew that it was an object that could cause cataclysms and catastrophes here on Earth versus, oh, there's no threat unless it's an alien spacecraft. It's like a psychological type thing. And I want to get my friend Kevin Hogan on. He's one of the top psychologists and hypnotherapists and neurolinguistic programming dudes on the planet. The guy is genius, and everybody loves him when I have him on the show. I want to talk to him about psychological operations that could be used on a grand scale, and what this type, like, what would it be like if it really was an alien craft? There's talks of black swan events, and there's so much disinformation out there right now on 3i Atlas that, like, the amoeba under a microscope that people were passing around on YouTube. I don't know if it was really an amoeba, but it looked like an amoeba. So I was kind of joking about it, but it definitely wasn't 3i Atlas. We'll just put it that way. But this technology right here from China should be able to capture pretty good images with decent resolution of 3i Atlas. Nothing. High rise, nothing. What we do get is these little dots. We get these little pixels that are from stereotype technologies and satellite technologies, but nothing really, you know, where's the beef? Show me the beef. So I typed in Tianwen 1 3i Atlas because this was supposed to have captured images of 3i Atlas. It's a Chinese technology, very similar to the high rise. And you can see here's a YouTube video, which I went and watched, and there was no images that I saw from the Tianwen 1, just from the stuff that's available, like the James Webb and the ESA and others. And I scrolled down, and all of these images are either from the States, from the European Space Agency, or from the Chile Observatory. Nothing is from China. Nothing. Why? And what about Russia and India and Japan? Very weird. Very, very, very weird. This is the location of 3i Atlas today, Halloween. You can see it's, you know, here we are. If we were to be looking at 3i Atlas, would have a tough time because it's, you know, on the other side of Venus right there. But as it travels, and early 2026, it's actually going to be going past Jupiter. And there's two spacecrafts that are supposed to get footage and data on this object, the JUICE spacecraft and Lucy spacecraft. I love those names. Great, right? Juicy Lucy. Hello. All right, I'm sorry, but somebody else brought that up. Zorg made me say that. I'll blame it on Zorg. We go back to the, what was it? The 19th? Right here, right around the 19th. Yeah, the solar conjunction with Earth was right around the 19th. Now, the sun has been extra active on the opposite side of Earth. It has been launching CMEs almost daily, big ones. And you can see these from Soho, and there's plenty of websites that are showing these massive CMEs. And some people are wondering if 3i Atlas could have something to do with it, because it's, as it's passing, these CMEs are going off big time. And then when it gets closer to Jupiter, well, hold on a second. Let's go back to the 19th. Let's go back here. Stop. Check this out. The closest it gets to Earth is December 19th. The day after is winter solstice. And then when it gets to Jupiter the day before the spring equinox. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, there's 9 reasons right now that Professor Loeb is suspicious of this object, as well as several other very intelligent scientists, astronomers, physicists, etc. Let's look at, I want to just bring a few people up before we go back to that. So we've got Dr. John Brandenburg, Kepler's astronautics division head, senior scientist. He's a plasma physicist. He works with, he also has a PhD in theoretical plasma physics at the UC Davis Extension Campus, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in Livermore, California. Guy's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. Well, he theorizes that it's absolutely a craft. Look at some of these posts that Dr. John Brandenburg has put out there about 3i Atlas. Dear friends, Object 3i Atlas may be changing its trajectory to approach Earth. If confirmed, the following message should be sent. Approach Earth, and there will be war, and God is with us. Therefore, depart in peace or depart in pieces. We know about Mars. Friends, using a sweet orbit code, it is seen that a sequence of anti-sunward and sunward thrust, this is another post of his, as we are seeing, can rotate the trajectory of 3i Atlas to intercept Earth. But the numbers are required to be exact. In God we trust. And stay frosty. Here's another one. The observed changes he's put together. The full effect of the observed changes in 3i Atlas jets may be to change its orbit to intercept Earth. 3i is moving in retrograde Earth orbit, so major orbit changes may manifest themselves rapidly with closure rates of 100 kilometers a second. Check this trajectory estimate. Here he's showing you a typical comet. 3i Atlas is not a comet, he says. Comets are dirty snowballs of ices and silicate dusts, usually dominated by water ice, but also more volatile ices like CO, which vaporize beyond Jupiter. 2i Borisov, which is the second interstellar object we discovered, that's why 2i, displayed this. Oumuamua did not. 3i Atlas is now emulating the latter. Be alert. So Professor Loeb. Professor Loeb is definitely at the forefront right now. He's getting the majority of the media coverage, and the majority of people that are talking about 3i Atlas are referencing Professor Loeb. And they're either saying he's brilliant or the opposite. And there's been a lot of people speculating that he's some type of like secret agent. And look, I don't know if he is or not, but I mean, if he is a secret agent, does that mean what he is telling us is a part of some agenda that, you know, is like, what's the end game? That's what I want to know. What's the end game if it is an agenda? So some people have mentioned that Professor Loeb works with the World Economic Forum. And kind of, but not the way people are saying that he does. So I want to just bring this up as well. Professor Loeb is an agenda contributor. For the World Economic Forum. This means he has published articles and opinion pieces on the WEF's website and likely participates in some of their discussions or initiatives, particularly related to science, technology, and global challenges. He has contributed articles on topics such as how supercomputers could aid in future crises, mentioning a proposed science readiness reserves group and the search for extraterrestrial life and the potential implications of discovering UAPs. His involvement primarily seems to be an expert voice and thought leader rather than a full-time member of the organization's staff. So there you go. Now, also, I wanted to bring this up because there's been several people that I've seen leave in the chat that Professor Loeb is a professor at Harvard. So they think that means he's a part of the Skull and Bones. And I kind of laugh at that because the Skull and Bones isn't at Harvard. The Skull and Bones is a society, a secret society at Yale University. So an Ivy League, yes, but it's not at Harvard, it's at Yale. The Skull and Bones is a secret undergraduate senior co-society a senior society at Yale University. It was founded in 1832. It's one of Yale's oldest and most prestigious secret societies, known for its elite members who often go on to hold powerful positions in government and business. You got that right. One of the oldest and most prestigious secret societies in the United States, with many members becoming leaders in various fields. And members meet twice a week in a clubhouse called The Tomb, where they reportedly take oaths of secrecy and are expected to be open about their personal lives. So that's not at Harvard. Now, is there a branch off at Harvard? Maybe, but I think that's a huge stretch, and I'm not buying that, especially because you look at this club, Skull and Bones. Look at the people that we know have been in Skull and Bones and their last names. And it's kind of you got to be born into it. Let's just put it that way. All right, so we'll leave it at that. So I think that kind of debunks the skull and bones theory that people have had about Professor Loeb. I just wanted to take a moment there. And now let's go back to this article. First evidence for a non-gravitational acceleration of 3I Atlas at perihelion. So we've got the transverse and the, where did we go? Yeah, radial. So there's two types of acceleration that we cannot meet with gravity with 3I Atlas. We have radial acceleration and we have transverse acceleration. 135 kilometers a day, the object speed away from the sun increased by about 135 kilometers a day. That's about 1,000 times weaker than Earth's gravity, and it's still measurable by precise orbit tracking. Normally, the only major force of a comet is solar gravity, which is pulling inward. If you detect acceleration away from the sun, it means another force is acting, usually gas or dust jets, erupting as the sun heats the surface. In this case, the measured acceleration was stronger and more complex than typical comets, so Professor Loeb called it non-gravitational analogy. Now, transverse, let's look at the transverse component. Transverse means sideways. It's not toward or away from the sun, but along the orbital path, like something pushing the comet to the side. Think of the sun object line as an arrow pointing straight from the sun to 3I Atlas. The radial component is along that arrow, in or out. The transverse component is perpendicular to it, which is sideways, or it's a sideways motion around the sun. 3I Atlas has also experienced a sideways acceleration of about 60 kilometers a day, and that changes its orbital path slightly. It's small, about half the size of the outward radial push, but even a tiny sideways thrust can alter the trajectory, shifting where the comet will appear weeks or months later. So why is that unusual? The reason this is unusual is because most comets outgassing jets are more or less random, but average out in the radial direction away from the sun. Having a distinct transverse acceleration suggests that outgassing or other forces wasn't evenly distributed. So maybe one side of 3I Atlas had stronger jets, or the body's rotation caused the thrust to act off angle, producing a turn or drift in its orbital path. Here's an analogy. Imagine you're driving, you press the gas, that's your radial acceleration. Now imagine a strong wind, side wind, hits your car. You've got uneven tire spin pushing you sideways, and that's your transverse acceleration. So both forces combine to curve your path slightly. Wind, wheel going on, your wheel's spinning a little bit. You've got this massive crosswind, and then you hit the gas. So that the gas is the radial, the wind would be the transverse. In short, the radial push away from the sun is about 135 kilometers a day, and the transverse is about 60 kilometers a day. This shows that 3I Atlas is not moving like a simple rock in free fall. It is behaving like something is actively venting, rotating, or otherwise propelling this object. There's 9 anomalies now of 3I Atlas that are being looked at. The size, the lack of expected spectral features of cometary gas, the retrograde orbit, and the tilt favorable for inner solar system approaches and different planets, non-gravitational acceleration, steep brightening, color shift from bluer than the sun as it's passing the sun. That's amazing. The tail, anti-tail, and jet morphology oddities, and the trajectory passing near multiple planets, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, with a low probability under random models. Wow. It's incredible. Professor Loeb, Dr. John Brandenburg, Greg Allison. And then you should watch this video of Greg, 3I Atlas just lit up, because he's describing several of these other technologies that China has that should be able to capture this object. and they're not releasing the data. And last I checked, their government isn't shut down. So NASA doesn't have a monopoly on everything in space yet. And hopefully they won't ever get it because, you know, always a straight answer with those guys, right? So what chemical reactions are going on? Well, they're detecting a nickel alloy, which has been unobserved in nature that way. It has been found in industrialization applications. And as I talked to Greg about this just the other day, the nickel alloy that they have discovered on 3I Atlas is the same type of nickel alloy that's used to solidify and harden spacecraft and space technologies. Think about that for a minute. That's a pretty interesting synchronicity there. So anomaly. It'd be great. I mean, if this thing is literally just an egg-shaped 33-ton object that is emitting 33 gigawatts of power, that's what they're saying, which is more than like 100 nuclear reactors. That's a ridiculous amount of power. At least it depends on what kind of reactors you're talking about. Like some of the biggest reactors, no, but certain reactors. Let's look at that real quick. 33 gigawatts. How much power is 33 gigawatts? $33 billion watts. You could power 33 million homes. 24.5 to 33 million homes. 1 gigawatt typically powers about 750,000 to 1 million homes. And they're saying this thing's pushing 33 billion watts. Wow. That's pretty wild. See if I got anything else for today's presentation. Yeah, this is Greg's bio. So, and he's actually, this is an older one. L5 Society, National Space Institute, the Space Studies Institute, founded 3 chapters, the Cumberland L5 Society, North Star L5 Society, and the HAL 5. Recently executive vice president, served NSS most recently as executive vice president, many other capacities over the past 20 years, director for NSS, assistant treasurer for the NS5. Is it NS5 or NSS? NSS. Executive committee, chairman of the highly successful 1993 International Space Development Conference, co-chairman of the NSS National Phone Tree, president of the Huntsville, Alabama L5 Society, working on space planes, X-37, high-techs, orbital space plane. I mean, guy's a genius. So just to put into perspective, when you have people like that are, you know, looking at the data and they're saying, hey, this isn't normal, seems to be worth doing more research about, right? So thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you have a beautiful day, and hit the bell for all notifications here on YouTube. Jump on over and subscribe to our Rumble page. Check us out on Patreon. Remember to get your Gladiator Barley and Boomer Boost. Stuff's amazing. And use the code REX20 for 20% off. And be the change you want to see, everybody.